Well, let's talk about my heritage. Let's talk about booze. For 13 weird years, alcohol was prohibited in these United States. It was a masterclass in the foolishness of attempting to legislate morality. You might be shocked to learn how much alcohol was still produced, transported, and consumed under the pious noses of a government tasked with guarding the purity and upstanding character of its citizenry. Well, hi friends, I'm Nick Walton. I'm a coffee roaster, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a wee little farmer, and I can't stop thinking about the invisible scripts that run our lives. You're listening to The Values Sort. This is a field guide to the values that shape the patterns of thinking and behaviors that end up shaping our lives. This is an essay about heritage. My great-grandparents, my mom's folks, made bathtub gin during Prohibition, which I've always been a little curious about. Bathtub gin is how people colloquially refer to all manner of garbage liquor containing cheaply produced grain alcohol diluted with water, juniper berry juice, and even glycerine. They would have been experts at procuring this grain alcohol, probably legally produced for medical or scientific uses, and diverted for domestic consumption. They would have used their metal or porcelain bathtubs to blend the final beverage, bottled and distributed throughout the community. They would have known their way around distilling, even if bathtub gin didn't typically involve the actual distillation process. When you distill liquor, you start with grains. Grains soaked and boiled in water, often with herbs and spices and other goodies, until the mash is separated from the feedstock. I'm going somewhere here. The feedstock is the alcoholic liquid that will be distilled into whatever spirit you're distilling. And the remainder, the porridge-like grains mixture that's been all boiled up, is called the mash. The spirit is what you'd be going for in this scenario. That's the marketable material. But in the end, there's a lot more mash than there is spirit. Many years after Prohibition ended, my great-grandparents would come to visit us in Oregon from time to time, and when they came, they drove their sedan, and in the trunk of said land yacht, they had a special suitcase, ornate and beautiful. It contained a full wet bar, or a travel-sized wet bar. I don't even really drink. I'm an occasional summertime beer kind of guy, a neat whiskey from time to time with the right friend round a backyard autumn fire, but this is my heritage. One of my family's love languages is firearms. We share them, we hand them down through generations. There are some old guns rattling around in this family, and some very neat old pieces of engineering they are. I grew up around guns, and I'm not afraid of them. I'm not unfamiliar with them, with their operation and function, and I'm not oblivious to their power and their allure. Once, when I was learning to shoot larger firearms, we had a series of vegetables which we were invited to compare to the texture of our own bodies. Does the pumpkin feel softer or harder than my stomach? Does it seem more or less impervious to a bullet's piercing power? And then, of course, we shot the vegetables, and they were obliterated, and I was convinced guns were not toys, they were tools. In my home, for hunting. But I am not a hunter. I bear neither the need for a winter's meat nor the sporting desire. The world has changed, and I will not probably hand guns down to my children in the same way. My parents may not like reading this or hearing it. My grandparents would certainly not like reading this, and my deeper forefathers are likely rolling over in their graves, but I will not hand down the weapons themselves to my children. More than that, I will not work to hand down a value for them in particular. It's not that they're not beautiful on some level, but they're powerfully destructive and have become a representation of an ugly culture that's grown up around them in recent years. There's a part of me that laments the loss of this culture of hunting and sportsmanship. It's largely overshadowed by an aggressive fear of neighbor and protectionism, and I am repelled. Love of craft engineering, sportsmanship, these things are the spirit of my heritage. The rest is just mash. My dad's mom is in assisted living now. She is old, and she is in need of community and care, and she's able to find both in her current living situation. But it's required her to downsize, and so we have begun as a family to process the sorting of her life like so much tonnage. Who gets the roll-top desk? Who's taken the Ray Eyerly paintings? Who will be responsible for these things moving forward? I have her biscuit bowl. I have her fried chicken flipper. I have the rolling pin she received for her wedding, and a very well-used potato masher with a lot of life left in it. These things are tonnage. These things are mash. The spirit of my relationship with my grandmother is the time she excitedly told me that I had a baby sister, and later on she told me I had a baby brother. The spirit is not the biscuit bowl, it's the memory I carry of her making the biscuits and the recipe I contain within my brain today. Grandma is the grandparent I have been closest with throughout my life. Her husband died when I was just about 5, and my other grandparents were a little distant. I wrote about my grandfather in Craftsmanship. But Grandma was normal. She took us on errands, she walked us on regular days, we knew which of her phone books worked best for sitting up a little higher at her table for predictable meals of green beans and iceberg salads and yes, fried chicken and biscuits. That's the distillation of my relationship with her. That's the normalcy. My other grandparents were exotic and different and unknowable to me. Grandma was everything knowable. I treasure my memories, and I treasure her. What is this value I feel for my own past, for my family's past? What about that, I wonder? There is so much in the present I don't understand, so much about the future that I cannot predict. They say if you don't understand your past, you'll be doomed to repeat it. I'm reaching into my past, not for tonnage, but for meaning, for a thread linking things of worth and value from the past to my future. One day, in the not-too-distant future, my grandmother will go on to the next thing, and she will exist only in memories. My dad and I will carry the tonnage of a childhood lived alongside that woman, but what will my kids remember? Hands knurled from arthritis, the same few stories told over and over, oil of Olay, all mash. I have Grandma's biscuit bowl, but one day I will let it go, because as beautiful as it is, and as beautiful as my memories are, they are also the mash, and not the spirit. I have already decided. One day I will have a ceremony, and I'm not sure yet how it will look. Maybe when I'm about 60 years old, or maybe when I'm 70. I'm trying to think through it now. I will let the mash of my heritage go. I will let it die and be done. I will encourage my kids to remember their grandparents. I will share stories while I yet may. I will encourage them to harvest my belongings, items that might have some meaning or value to them, and then I will take the rest, and perhaps I will have a cleansing fire. And I will write a story for my children and contain for the past for any of my grandchildren who would care to observe it. And I will attempt, like my ginny forefathers, to distill and refine. Only my refined spirit will be an attempt to send something of value forward into the future. I will dig a hole while my body will yet still dig. I will gather my grandchildren and hand them shovels, and I will tell stories about the biscuits of my youth and the subtle and not-so-subtle racism that existed in my childhood, and that will doubtlessly still exist in theirs, and the deaths that came too soon, and the fried chicken, and the appreciation of fine engineering, and together we will bury the past and allow it to die. Because our heritage isn't the mash, it's the distilled spirit that's rendered at the end.